and welcome back to Özgür News. My name is Amelie and I present a monthly English program summarizing news and commentary from the Middle East. We are part of Özgür TV, which publishes daily Turkish programs under the slogan of "In midst of reality, in the center of struggle." Today's topics include a roundup of the latest developments in Palestine, a gold mine collapse in Erzincan, Can Atalay losing his seat in Turkey's parliament, the latest developments on the hunger strikes, as well as solidarity protests in Turkey, Kurdistan, and Europe, executions of Kurdish political prisoners in Iran, and lastly, a translated excerpt of Rojava Solidarity Network People's Bridge's online panel. As the war in Palestine continues, disease and famine are spreading amongst the people of Gaza. Additionally, Israel's government has spoken of an ultimatum to return Israeli hostages until Ramadan. Otherwise, in the words of President Netanyahu, the assault on Gaza will be completed. The war in Palestine continues, with recent developments showing further hits on civilian infrastructure, particularly the raid on Al-Nasser Hospital in Khan Yunis, which created an international outcry of people standing in solidarity with the Palestinian people. As the war enters its sixth month, thousands in the Gaza Strip are left with no other option but to flee their homes and take refuge in camps. Israel continues to bomb the region, creating hundreds of casualties every day while telling the people to evacuate to so-called safe zones. A resident from Rafah, the southern region of the Gaza Strip bordering Egypt, told news agencies the following: "There is no safe place in the Gaza Strip. They have even hit UN schools and residential areas. They tell people to evacuate to safe designated zones that are not safe. There is no safe place. The vast majority of people who are now living in camps are lacking food and water as well as medical care. They are scrambling to survive whilst the Zionist state continues to shell throughout the day and at night. Famine and disease are spreading, sending the already war-stricken area into a further humanitarian crisis, with people resorting to scraps and garbage in search of food. Israel has now given the Palestinian resistance forces a deadline to release Israeli hostages until the month of Ramadan begins in the Muslim calendar. That is the 11th of March in the Gregorian calendar, which leaves a span of about 2 weeks. Else, the Netanyahu government is threatening to complete their mission of eradicating the Gaza Strip by launching an assault on Rafah, where many refugees are located at this time. Despite the situation in Palestine intensifying, peoples across the world are continuing their protest of the genocide through various actions since the 7th of October. Many citizens continue to protest despite heavy police and state violence continuing. They are demanding an end to the war, with the call for a ceasefire increasing and spreading amongst the protests internationally. The chief of the People's Front for the Liberation of Palestine in Lebanon was recently interviewed by Turkish Kurdish news agency ITA. The Liberation Front is part of the forces which launched the Al-Aqsa flood operation on the 7th of October. It struggles for the national liberation of the peoples of Palestine. When asked about the international solidarity Palestine is currently receiving, the representative Marwan Abdel-Al said the following: "To put it in a few words, people want to support Palestine. We want these people to support our ideas. When people all over the world demonstrate, they show their determination on the basis of dignity and humanity. Our unification is a priority. They want to normalize the massacre in Palestine, and some people say that they are not affected by what is happening here. Our answer to these people is that people who are not affected by Palestine or have nothing to do with it, they are not concerned with their own interests, because the Palestinian issue today affects everyone." A Canadian-owned gold mine in Erzincan, northern Kurdistan region, has collapsed following multiple warnings of safety risks. The landslides buried workers beneath tons of cyanide soil. Cemil Aksu, a representative of revolutionary ecological organization Pollen Ecology, present in the region, as well as Dem Party Mayor Orhan Celebi, gave statements. A natural disaster occurred in a mine in Erzincan, northern Kurdistan region. The expected disaster occurred in the gold mine in Erzincan. In the mine, which was not closed despite all warnings, the soil slipped and mountains of cyanide and sulfuric acid collapsed. Workers were exposed under tons of soil in the gold mine, which has been operating for a long time and has not ceased its activities despite all warnings. The Turkish state is trying to conceal the number and condition of the workers buried under 10 million tons of cyanide soil. A similar disaster had occurred before, involving cyanide leakage. But despite this, the Canadian Gold Company, whose license was not cancelled, continued to operate. Pollen ecology representative Cemil Aksu said the following: "While renewing our pain on the anniversary of the earthquake of 6th of February, we have experienced a disaster once again. This is not just a landslide, but a disaster that will have long-term consequences that will affect human and natural health. All the actions of the government in Turkey for the past 22 years have always resulted in disaster. All the mining activities they have undertaken lead to the destruction of large basins and natural massacres. Therefore, we are facing disasters step by step. This is a political murder, nature and labor murder. This is deliberate murder." In order to conceal the extent of the disaster, the Turkish state banned access to the disaster area and prevented revolutionary members of parliament and ecologists who wanted to go to the city for solidarity from entering the city with a detention. Dem Party Mayor Orhan Celebi stated that they were blocked by the police on the road and were not allowed to enter. In his statement he said, "1 year ago, we went to the region where the disaster occurred and warned the authorities. About 10 months ago, a cyanide leakage occurred in the same region, and this leakage started to flow into the Euphrates River, one of the most important rivers in Asia. In our investigations, we observed a great massacre in nature. In addition, in our interviews, it was stated that cancer diseases were observed in the people of the region after the installation of the mine. We had warned that the continuation of the work in the region would lead to major disasters in the coming period. Despite all of our warnings, the authorities remained silent and expanded the mine bed. This massacre is the result of the expansion works. The main reason for the restrictions is to prevent the real face of the massacre from being reflected to society. Those who did not take the necessary precautions to prevent the massacre from happening beforehand banned the journalists of the institutions that want to introduce this massacre, who want the massacre to be conveyed to society, from entering the city with an arbitrary practice. The size of the massacre is very large. We received information from the workers working there that tons of landslides, dozens of workers are missing. The soil that slipped in the disaster are cyanide soils. There is an intense rainfall in the region at the moment. With this rain, cyanide flows into different natural resources. This cyanide poison will affect all regions, crops, and human health. What needs to be done is to stop the mining company as soon as possible and put an end to this disaster." At the same time, Celebi stated that 64 provinces of Turkey have been declared as mining areas and sold to foreign companies. He also stated that this will continue the massacre of living spaces by the Turkish state. Ecology and laborist organizations across Turkey reacted to the disaster in Iliç. Çöpler Gold Mine and Ana Gold Company must be closed down immediately. All public officials and company officials who are complicit in the crime should be investigated. Following his sentencing to 18 years detention in the Gezi trials, Hatay representative Can Atalay of the Turkish Workers' Party, TİP, had his seat in parliament revoked. Atalay himself wrote a statement from prison. Workers' Party of Turkey TİP Hatay Member of Parliament Can Atalay was sentenced to 18 years in prison for aiding the crime of attempting to overthrow the Republic of Turkey during the Gezi trial on the 25th of April 2022. Atalay was elected as Hatay deputy from TİP in the elections on the 14th of May 2023, however his detention was not ended despite objections. On the 30th of January, Can Atalay's parliamentary seat was unlawfully terminated by the Turkish Grand National Assembly. After the reading of the verdict, members of parliament from various opposition parties protested the verdict with slogans and banners in parliament. Can Atalay himself sent a written message from prison. "This has happened. They have done this too, despite the clear provisions of the constitution, which leave no room for any doubt. They disqualified the elected Hatay deputy from parliament. On behalf of my country, I regret that the Turkish Grand National Assembly could be made a party to this crime. I am worried about the damage this situation will cause the country. It is unpredictable who will use which right, how they will use which authorization, and which lawlessness will continue in future." The hunger strikes by Kurdish political prisoners protesting isolation detention we included in our episode last week are continuing. This past month, socialists in Turkey and Europe joined in a 3-day solidarity hunger strike, carrying the demands and attention from Turkish prisons to Europe's streets. Demanding the physical liberation of Kurdish people's leader Abdullah Öcalan, who is held in isolation in İmralı prison, PKK and PAJK prisoners started a hunger strike on the 27th of November 2023 as part of the campaign Freedom for Leader Arpor, Solution to the Kurdish Problem. Socialists also started a short hunger strike in various cities in Turkey and Europe in support of the isolation protests in prisons. Turkey's Socialist Party of the Oppressed, ESP, organized a 3-day hunger strike against the isolation in prisons, especially in İmralı, and to support the hunger strikes. An ESP hunger strike representative made a statement. "The politics that the government feeds on are politics of destruction for the peoples and laborers and for capital. The Kurdish problem is the main problem of this geography. The capitalist state feeds on the lack of solution. Laboring classes are enslaved by racist, nationalist, and religious politics. Kurdish enmity has been turned into a cover for all dirty policies. Isolation is insolvency. Isolation is a violation of human rights. Isolation is war, occupation, lawlessness. Isolation is hunger, poverty, theft, gang order for all laboring peoples." A 3-day hunger strike was organized in Europe in solidarity with the hunger strike initiated by prisoners for the end of the absolute isolation torture of PKK leader Abdullah Öcalan, the usurpation of rights of political prisoners, and for a democratic solution to the Kurdish question. The 3-day hunger strikes of the European Federation of Oppressed Migrants, AVECON, Socialist Women's Union, SKB, Voice of Prisoners Platform, TSP, and the youth organization Young Struggle in Germany, Switzerland, England, and France ended with press statements. The socialists announced that their hunger strikes will take place in Cologne, London, Paris, and Basel. In their statement, they said, reminding that hundreds of prisoners have been on strike since the 27th of November 2023 against the inhumane isolation policy and rights violation in the prisons of the Turkish state. The prisoners said, Kurdish people's leader Abdullah Öcalan has been kept under isolation on İmralı Island for decades, and no news has been received from him for nearly 3 years. The Turkish state is extending the isolation with the newly built S-type and Y-type prisons. The Turkish state, which wants to break the will of thousands of people, also aims to suffocate any spark of resistance inside and outside. While increasing all kinds of pressure and attacks on prisoners inside, it is attacking the struggle to embrace prisoners outside. A hunger strike representative also said the following: "Because isolation is applied to the peoples in a racist, chauvinist manner in the person of Mr. Abdullah Öcalan, the situation of sick prisoners is getting worse and worse, and their freedom must be ensured as soon as possible. It is legally obligatory to release sick prisoners. However, they are not released and left to die. In the last year, 78 of our friends lost their lives in political prisons. Our call is for all our people to take action on this issue and to increase their actions until they get results." The Islamist regime in Iran continues to execute Kurdish prisoners. Many aren't even announced at this time. The inhumane actions by the regime have provoked an international outcry and gained huge outrage on social media. Following the uprising, after the murder of Gina Amini in 2022, Iran continues executing Kurdish prisoners. The Voice of Prisoners platform, TSP, said the following in their proclamation: "In Iran, the fascist mullah regime's campaign of arrest, torture and execution against opposition are continuing at full speed. In recent weeks, 6 Kurdish political prisoners were executed. After the execution of Mohammad Gobadlu and Farhad Salimi, Kurdish prisoners Mohsen Mazlum, Mohammad Faramazi, Wafa Arzaba, Pezman Fateh were executed. The executions were carried out in Khalzihar prison in Kraj. The 4 Kurds, who had been imprisoned in Iran for 19 months, were able to meet their families for the first and last time 1 day before their execution. With the latest executions, the Iranian government has executed a total of 25 Kurdish prisoners since the beginning of the year. According to a report published in January by the Iranian human rights organization Harana, 746 people were executed in Iran in 2023. The fascist mullah regime, which was shaken by the Xinjiang Azadi protests that began after the assassination of Gina Amini on the 16th of September 2022 because she was exposed, is trying to prevent social opposition through imprisonment, detention, torture, and executions. But the Iranian people are not silent about the attacks of this fascist, misogynist regime and continues to resist and rebel. The spark that was ignited by the murder of Gina Amini continues to burn. The political prisoners in the prisons also continue to resist. In a telephone conversation with their families, 61 female political prisoners in Evin prison announced that they would go on hunger strike on the 25th of January to protest against the executions. "We welcome and support the struggle of the Iranian people for democracy and freedom, the general strike of the people of Rojava against executions and the resistance of political prisoners who do not submit to the regime in prisons. We condemn the attacks, arrests and executions of the fascist Iranian mullah regime against the opposition and demand an end to the executions. Freedom for political prisoners." The People's Bridge Solidarity Network for Rojava, northeastern Syria region, held an online panel with Mizgin Erabo, a speaker of the Kurdish Institute for the Unity and Solidarity of People, SYPG in short. Erabo gave an insight to the current situation of the revolution in northeastern Syria. In the past months, infrastructure has been attacked twice. This means we are left without water and electricity. These attacks result in the administration not being able to provide the level of wealth and quality of life to the peoples of the region. This is a specific target the fascist forces use in order to turn peoples against the revolution and make it collapse from within, since the airstrikes are not sufficient. However, they have not succeeded in their attempt to stop the revolution. At the same time, the freedom guerrillas in the mountains of Kurdistan have hit the Turkish state forces hard. So there have also been attempts to spread dislike for the guerrilla fighting in the mountains. Yet the fascist Turkish state has failed again in agitating the peoples of northeastern Syria to rally against the revolution in Rojava. The opposite has happened. The hatred against the Turkish forces occupying parts of Rojava has only intensified. On the contrary, the wish of the people to continue the revolutionary struggle here has persisted. This is also due to the example we could witness from the struggle in Palestine. We saw what happened there. It really is not far removed from the same happening here in Rojava. We could clearly see how the fascist Turkish state organized different protests in support of Palestine, but in reality, the Turkish state continued to make deals with Israel behind closed doors. That is what proved to us that the freedom guerrillas' combat of the Turkish state is effective and vital, that it exactly the intimidation and the fear the fascist state needs for them not dare attack Rojava in the same way we can see Palestine being assaulted today. This has shown people how important it is to defend the structure in Rojava, the revolution here. I think the biggest example is on the anniversary of the date, the 15th of February, when Kurdish leader Abdullah Öcalan went to prison. There were demonstrations all over Rojava. It was another way of telling the world how important it is to the people here that Rojava is defended. Of course, the autonomous administration plays a special role for the population and for the structure in Rojava. Thank you for watching Özgür News. This program is published at 6 p.m. Central European Time on every last Sunday of the month. For more news, follow us on our social media channels. Until next time.